Welcome to the Self Healers Podcast, a place where we hold space for each other on our paths to mental, emotional, and spiritual healing. It is no accident that you landed here. I'm your host, Bree. Let's get to it. Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Self Healers Podcast. I am so happy that you're here, and in this episode, I wanted to share a little bit of my personal history. I'm probably not going to dig too much into the quote-unquote issues or how I got there, but just a brief overview of my life up until this point. And then I think in each episode that I do when I'm just by myself, I will dig deep into how a certain area of healing came up for me and what led me to understand how I got there. So starting from the beginning, I was born in Georgia with my sister, Michelle. She was 7 years older than us. And then I was lucky enough to be born with a twin. Her name is Mary. And we're born in Georgia. And then at 4 years old, we moved to Wisconsin after my mom and my dad got a divorce. So from 4 years old on, I was raised by a single mother. And my older sister, Michelle, she would bounce back and forth between my mom's and my dad's, my dad who lived in Florida, and then my mom. So whenever things would get too hard in one spot, she would move. And because my dad was a drug dealer, and he kind of used Michelle as an assistant in that business. So I'm sure it wasn't an easy life. And when it got too much, she moved back to Wisconsin to be with my mom to recalibrate and get back to being a kid. But when she would come back and live in Wisconsin, I just thought she was the coolest. I thought she was so pretty, and she had the coolest clothes and an accent and a tan. And so I always looked forward to her coming back. She was the big older sister that I could look up to because she was so much older than us. So we didn't grow up poor, but we certainly didn't have a lot of disposable income. Like, my mom was a single mother. She worked as a legal secretary. But I never remember wanting for anything. My mom was always very good at her finances, and she was able to always provide for us what we needed. So in around 5th grade, this is when my hair pulling started. There is a term for it. It's called Trichotillomania. But I started pulling out my eyebrows and eyelashes in about 5th grade. And then it progressed to somewhere a little less obvious because other people were starting to notice that I had half of an eyebrow or my eyelashes were missing. And then I started pulling hair out of the top of my head. And then obviously that did not go unnoticed either. And so then I started going underneath my hair where nobody could see it. But my mom knew that I had a tendency to pull. So, but let me explain first what it did for me. The hair pulling, I just remember one day in 5th grade, I was sitting behind a girl who had pigtails in her hair. And I could see the root of her hair. I could see it enter her scalp. There was like one hair, like lone hair that looked off from the others. And I was just like, I wonder what that looks like. You know, the hair looks like outside of your head. So I remember pulling out, then it started out with the eyebrows, and I became obsessed with the way that the root looked in the hair. And so then I would just pull out my eyebrows to look at the root. And then as it progressed to my hair, it started to become like a textural thing. And I would pull out the hairs that felt most interesting to pull out, for lack of a better word, but I would want them to be curly. I'd want them to feel a different texture than my regular straight hair. And I would just pull it out to play with it. And what it gave me, and I didn't recognize it at the time, but it was like a sigh. Like my body could sigh. It was a relief. And I know that it sounds like it was painful. It was never painful. It was always a relaxation. It was a way for me. I mean, so then it progressed, and it wasn't so focused, the pulling, and then it became where I would pull out fingerfuls of hair. And it became like, they call it an impulse control disorder, but it was just obsessive. I would, if I wasn't able to get my hands on my hair, I would think about when I could get my hands on my hair. I just wanted to pull it out it allowed me to numb. And at the time, I didn't know what I was trying to numb. All I knew is that it felt good. I liked doing it. And I would lay in bed and read my books, and I would pull out my hair, and I would let the hair fall to the other side of my bed. And I was usually pretty good at scraping the carpet and pulling up the hair and throwing it in the trash. But sometimes I forgot, and my mom would go into my bedroom, and she would find the hair, and she would come find me to wherever I was in the house, and she would just be like, "Are you pulling out your hair again?" And it was like I just got into a lot of trouble for pulling out my hair. It became a huge source of shame. And just to be clear, my mom was watching her daughter pull out her hair, and she didn't understand why. And I cannot fault her for her reaction. She was scared, and she didn't know what to do. And out of love, she wanted me to stop doing it, but I couldn't. And I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to stop. But because I was accosted every time that, like if the wind blew and somebody could see a bald spot, I would be in trouble. If I was caught playing with my hair, my hand would be smacked. So I became very, very good at hiding parts of myself that I didn't think other people would approve of. And so I also became very hypervigilant. So I could be playing with my hair, and it's like I had eyes in the back of my head. Is there anybody around that can see me do it? I became very good at keeping secrets about myself, and it started with the hair pulling. So high school was okay. I mean, there was nothing really traumatic in my high school. The normal high school fights and stuff happened, but I was, a good athlete for the most part. And I was pretty popular. I had friends, a lot of friends, and there was nothing super traumatic in high school. But when I was 16, I found alcohol. And alcohol was like a warm hug. Alcohol allowed me to just be free. That's the best way I could explain it. I was so, up until that I found alcohol, I was so worried how other people would view me. Which I think is pretty normal for a high school kid. But for me, it just felt like I could finally be myself when I drank. And I didn't drink often. The first time I drank was on spring break when I was 16, and I was able to, make out with a boy that I thought was really cute from Michigan. And, uh, and, and then it progressed as before I started college. Then it became like probably an every weekend thing, where I would drink a lot, and I never drank just for the taste. I always drank with a purpose. Right from the beginning, I wanted to be drunk. I didn't want to be I didn't want to be myself, my normal guarded self. I wanted to be uninhibited. When I drank, I was able to tell boys that I thought were cute that I thought they were cute. I was able to tell my friends that I love them. I was able to just be uninhibited, free, and don't get me wrong, the next morning when I would wake up and if I had a much too vulnerable conversation than what I was used to having, I would get like the shame that was attached to it. But that the price I paid for that freedom, for those couple hours of freedom, was worth it. I just had so much fun when I drank. And in college, it was kind of the same thing. It was binge drinking every weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I had so much fun. I met a lot of really fun people. The people who I hung out with were obviously also binge drinkers. So I didn't think anything was wrong with it. And I really don't think there was anything wrong with it at that time. I wasn't using it as a drug then, but I was using it as a way as a social lubricant. There were things that I could do and that I could say that I was not able to do and say if I was sober. I graduated college with a psychology degree, and then I moved to Arizona right after I graduated college. And I was, for the first time, I was by myself. I was my twin sister, she didn't come until like 3 years later. So I had just moved out here with a college friend, and I got into my first serious relationship of my life. And what was significant about that, looking back, is I was, kind of infatuated with him. He was the only person I really knew here, and his friends became my friends, and I was able to enmesh myself into his life. And it was probably one of my best relationships that I've been in my adult life, probably the most fun and less dramatic, but it was also extremely codependent, where I only showed him parts of myself that I wanted him to see, and I hid the parts that I didn't. So that relationship pretty much ended after a few years, and then the rest of my 20s and 30s up until I met my ex-husband at 33, I was pretty much single. I mean, I had a couple short-term relationships, but I was pretty much single, and I was living it up. I had I still went out and I drank every weekend. I had a lot of fun with my friends. And then when I got to be about 30, 31, all of my friends started to pair off and get married. And this led me to feel very lonely. And this is where I really started to ramp up my drinking. At this point, I had lived alone, and since there was nothing else to do, I started drinking alone by myself at night, but I still somewhat had it under control. And I didn't really think that I was using it for any other reason other than that's just what you do. So When in 2007, I received the call that my older sister Michelle had died. She had moved out to Arizona about 8 months prior to her dying. So she had moved out here and with her daughter at the time, who was 3 years old. And when I got that news that she had died, that's when my drinking turned into a drug. When someone dies unexpectedly, and especially the kind of up and down relationship that her and I had, there was a ton of guilt. I was not able to handle the guilt. I had so much. I was disgusted with myself that I could ever fight with her, which is kind of crazy to think about because siblings fight. But when someone dies, it completely changes the game, and you replay all of the fights that you had and how silly you were and how could you do that? How could you say that? There was an instance before she died where we had gone to this wildlife park in Arizona, and Michelle, she had been abusing pills. We didn't know to what extent, but she told us it was muscle relaxers, and she was driving that day, and on our way back, she must have taken something at the park, and I saw that her eyes were closing, and I slapped the back of her seat, and I just started yelling at her. I'm like, I can't believe you took a pill, you're driving us, you could kill us, and it got heated and escalated. And I just remember her having this teardrop that fell out of her eye. And I didn't talk to her for a couple weeks after that happened because I was so mad. But thankfully, my sister Mary, she was the peacemaker, and her and I went over to Michelle's house the week before she died, and we were able to reconcile. But after she had died, or when she died, that memory of me yelling at her and then that teardrop, that was all I could think about. And I couldn't think about it. And so I started drinking myself into oblivion pretty much every night. I started thinking, or I'd wake up in the morning and I would say, today I'm not going to drink. I feel like crap. I can't do it. And I'd go to work, and then I'd get home, and then I would not have any alcohol at my house. And then after I had dinner and everything, I'd be running out to the store to buy alcohol. And this happened more often than I would like. But as the freshness of it wore off, I was able to kind of stop thinking about it. As much as I was, the guilt kind of faded, but I was also completely numb. And I ended up leaving my job as a paralegal, and I started a pet sitting business. And when I started the pet sitting business, I started working at a restaurant, and I just wasn't able to drink like I used to. So I wasn't able to drink every day. And as I got busier with my pet sitting, I definitely wasn't able to drink every day. So I was under the impression that since I could go days without drinking, I didn't have a problem. And then, but I still drank, quite a bit of alcohol anytime I could. And I met my ex-husband when I was 33. I think it was 2010. And I just knew that once we started trying for a baby, that I was not going to drink anymore. So it really wasn't a problem. But even during the beginning of our relationships, like I would not want to hang out with him one night because I just wanted to be alone to drink, But I didn't think it was anything wrong with it because I just thought, I wanted my alone time. I've always wanted alone time. And I could always justify drinking by myself or drinking too much. I would hide alcohol from him and I would use the excuse that he just doesn't understand, and so that's how it started. And in 2013, well, throughout my pregnancy, I gave up drinking, no problem. It was not hard at all. I didn't think about it. I didn't want it. And I thought, see, I didn't even, it didn't even cross my mind that I was that I couldn't stop. So I stopped easily. I had my son, and then my dog died. And when my dog died, I picked up my son was about 3 months old, and I picked up right where I'd left off before I got pregnant. And here is when I started to hide alcohol, to lie about what I was drinking. This is when I started obsessing about it. And thankfully for me, my twin, Mary, she had recognized that she was drinking too much. And I remember we took a walk one day and she said, I just don't think I can drink anymore. And I was like, what? That's what we do. How can you not? What are you going to do? But I still didn't think that I didn't think that that was something I could do. At this point, I was a new mom, and my marriage started to get pretty bad. And the alcohol was the only release that I had from my life. But about when my son was a little over a year old, I tried for the first time to quit drinking. And I think I made it like 76 days, but my marriage was not good at all. And it was just too much, and so I started drinking again. And a few months after that, I had filed for divorce, and we had to live together after I had filed, and it was probably the hardest parts of my life. And that's when my drinking really, really increased. I probably drank about a bottle and a half of wine a night. And I hesitate to say that because I know that if anybody is listening who is questioning their drinking, it's easy to get into the comparison game. To say, because that's what I used to do. When I would be by myself having my own parties, I would be watching episodes of Intervention, and I would always want to watch the alcoholic ones because if I saw an alcoholic be completely off the rails, I could just be like, I would never do that. I would never do that. I would never drink first thing in the morning. I would never do this. But the thing about drinking too much is you're always, always breaking promises to yourself. So maybe I wouldn't drink in the morning now, but in 10 years, I might, And one of my favorite quotes about drinking is from Laura McCowan. And she said, the question isn't, am I an alcoholic? The question is, am I free? And I wasn't free. I thought about drinking all day long. In the morning, I was certain that I wouldn't drink. And by the time the hangover wore off and it was about, 7:00 at night, I was drinking. I was constantly breaking promises to myself. I was staying up way later than I should. I was constantly running on about 4 or 5 hours sleep. But nobody would know it. I didn't miss work. I still had my pet sitting business. I took care of my son. And I was a functioning alcoholic, and I really don't identify as an alcoholic, but I was functioning. Okay. So after my ex-husband moved out, after we were getting a divorce, but we still had to live together for about a year, I was like, that's it. I am going to have so much fun. I'm going to start going out. I'm going to start going to the bars. But by this point, I was so isolating. I didn't want anybody to talk to me while I was drinking. It was an assault if I got like even a text message towards the end. It was just like, oh, leave me alone. And then I started to get really, really, really bad heartburn, and I just physically could not drink. So I remember I had made the deal, talking about it with my sister, that I was going to quit at the end of March when I was going to turn 39. And it was January, and my heartburn had gotten so bad that I decided that I was going to quit the next day. And I had sent her a text, and I said, my chest pain is so bad. Check on me in the morning, because I don't know if I'm going to die or not, So I didn't die, and I woke up in the morning, and I was just like, I'm done drinking. I physically cannot do this anymore. And for about 9 months, I didn't drink. But I was only focused on losing weight and improving my physical appearance and making myself into a person who I thought somebody was going to date. And intentionally, I did not want to date for an entire year after I got divorced, because I just did not want to be around any man. So I spent this time being just not drinking. I was sober, but some people would call it a dry drunk. And then Donald Trump got elected president. And this is not a political podcast. I will not bring up politics, but at the time I was heavily invested into politics. Now I realize it was a distraction for me not to deal with my own stuff. But at the time, it devastated me. And I drank that night. And from November all the way till the following August, I was up and down with my drinking. And I was not drinking, I was drinking. I was not drinking, I was drinking. And one day during this time, my dog, my 15-year-old dog, Brody, he passed away. And I was obviously unable to handle any type of grief. So I was hanging pictures of him. Like a few weeks later, I had blown up this one picture that I loved of him, and I put it in a frame. And after I was done, I went and I went to the store. I was like, that's it. And so I drank that night, and I came home, and I called my sister, and I was just like, I just don't think I like to have negative feelings. Like, it was the first click for me that I just didn't like to feel bad, and that's why I was drinking. So the universe had enough of me going on and off the wagon and never getting anywhere. So the universe said, what is it going to take for me to get her to stop drinking? And then poof, now I shit my pants. So this becomes a regular thing, a dignity stealing thing. I had uncontrollable bowel movements. I never knew when it was going to happen. Many times I had to just get right in the shower. My body was physically falling apart. I remember at one point I was getting a pedicure, and the woman doing my feet, she was massaging the bottoms of them, and she looked up at me, and she crinkled up her face, and she rubbed her belly, and she goes, "Ooh, that's bad." And I said, "You can tell that I have digestion issues? And she was like, yeah, it's bad. I can feel it in your feet. And I was just like, oh my God, even if that's not a sign, right? So it got pretty bad with the digestion issues. And also, I just wasn't able to feel. I wasn't able to feel anything. And when you can't feel, it becomes so painful because you just don't understand why you're here. What's the point of all of this? Because you can't selectively numb yourself. Because if you're numbing the pain, you're also numbing the joy. And I mean, I could talk about having feelings, but I didn't know what it felt like. I didn't know. There was nothing going on inside. It was flatlined. And one morning I just woke up after another relapse, and I just said, do you just want to try to be happy? And I just said, yes, I do. I want to try. And that's when I found an online recovery group, and that changed everything for me. And I couldn't go to AA. I couldn't speak. The thought of speaking out loud, something I couldn't even understand myself, was just too far out there for me. I could not do it. So I joined this online recovery group, and I forced myself to be active. It brought up so many issues for me, so many insecurities, so many times I just wanted to quit because it was too hard just dealing with the mental stuff of it, just the likes and the engagement and the, trying to, making up stories about how people are perceiving you when you've never met them. I mean, it was really, really a long lesson in letting go of these insecurities that I had. But I kept saying, you need community, you need to talk with people who understand what you're going through. And that was like the biggest takeaway that I got from it, because I finally found people who obsessed the way I did about alcohol. And even though I had a twin sister who was in the same boat and had talked to me about it before, I thought maybe it was just unique to us. But when I could talk to people about, oh, you would say that you weren't going to drink in the morning too, and then by the end of the day you were, and like these obsessions that I had about drinking, and the friendships that I started to develop and the bonds that I started to develop with people really changed everything for me. I was able for the first time to start trying to figure out why I drank. I didn't understand it. Because looking back on my life, I was just like, I mean, I was never raped. I was never, abused physically. I was never, I didn't have anything that I could put my finger on and go, this is why I started doing it, other than my sister dying. But I had already been drinking before my sister died. So why was I doing it? I didn't understand. And I was able to peel back the onion, and with the help of people in this online community, and I was able to finally see. And this is where I started to blame the people who I felt were responsible for this. And I spent a lot of time being angry and mad and pissed off that they would do this to me. And I actually I was this way because of them. And, but at some point it wasn't enough to sustain me anymore. I was just like, I'm still not happy. I'm still empty. And I don't know what I can do to change that. So one day I was listening to the podcast of the Paul Churchill, who does the Recovery Elevator podcast, and he was sharing his experience about his experience with ayahuasca at this place called Rhythmia. And I immediately got a physical reaction. My hands started sweating and my heart started beating fast. And I sent him a message and I was just like, I need to know more about this, So I started talking to somebody else in the group about the ayahuasca, and I was just like, oh, I don't know if I can do it. Isn't it just another drug? Like I don't want to become addicted to anything else. And he explained to me that no, it's actually a medicine. It's DMT, and DMT is released in your brain when you are born and when you die. And this is like a medicine that will give you like a spiritual connection. And I had started dipping my toe into the spiritual aspect of things. For many, many years, I was an atheist, and I thought anybody who believed in God was silly. But as I started to get more into recovery, I started to understand the comfort that the belief in something bigger than you provided. And I started dipping my toe in. And then one day I just was like, I have to go to Rhythmia. I have to go. So I booked my reservation at Rhythmia, and thankfully my sister decided to go too. So we were able to go together along with a couple other people from the online community that I was a part of. And honestly, I went there because like, this is what I really thought it would bring me. I thought that I would finally stop eating poorly. Like, honestly, that was really one of my only hopes, because at this point I thought if I could just fix my body, then everything else will fall into place. I will meet the man to fall in love, to save me, to fix everything. And other than that, I honestly didn't know what to expect. I thought maybe they would show me some visuals of the people who I felt had wronged me in my life, and I could get more validation that, yeah, they're to blame. And sorry, sweetie, you don't have to do anything else. We'll take care of you. And I'd feel love for the first time. And I went with kind of those expectations. And what I got was nothing at all that I expected, but every single thing that I needed. And I have a couple videos on YouTube that you can find on the link from my website that it links to the YouTube videos where I share my experience with ayahuasca, but it changed absolutely everything in my life. And I went in one person and I came out another, knowing without a doubt that I was a soul having a human experience, and nothing that I ever worried about mattered at all. And the things that I was focusing on and worried about, I couldn't believe that I for a second gave it any thought. And I left there, I'm like, I'm fixed. I am fixed. And I don't have to, nothing matters, so I don't need to worry about anything. So I came home, and guess what? Everything went right back to normal. I couldn't understand how to integrate everything that I had seen and learned about myself at Rhythmia and come home and have the same triggers that were there before I left, and my reactions to them were the exact same. So I went into this like lull. I'm just like, I don't know that I can do anything. I don't know what else to do. I'm at a loss. And I was watching this podcast or this documentary on Netflix called Heal. And during this documentary, there was a Reiki healer who was doing a tapping technique on this woman. And during this interaction, this woman was able to have this aha moment and let go of something that was holding her back. And I was just like, well, I'll try it, So that night I got online and I started looking for a Reiki healer in Arizona. And when I came across this one woman's page, I was like, she's it. That's who I'm going to. She was intuitive. And I thought that I still had this expectation that something outside of me was going to fix me, to tell me what to do. All I wanted was to be told what to do. I went and I met with Michelle at Source Connection for my first Reiki appointment. And I remember she had told me, after she had given me everything that she had gathered from my spirit guides or whatever, and she said, they're saying you're at the door. All you need to do is open it, but you just keep knocking. And I was like, well, what does that mean? What do I need to do? And she was just like, I can't tell you what to do. Like, you have to figure that out. And I was just like, no, like, why can't you just tell me what to do? And so we sat down, and my weight has been something that I have struggled with since, I don't know, elementary school. It didn't matter what weight I was at. I was never thin enough. I always had problems with overeating. And at one point in high school, going into high school after 8th grade, I was anorexic for a summer, but I became too hungry. Like, I liked food. And it was just a lifelong pattern of restricting myself and then overindulging. And I eat like I drink. I obsess about it. When I'm eating, I'm already thinking about what I'm going to eat next. I plan my meals like I did with alcohol. I lie about what I ate to people who I think would care. So it's the same patterns that I do with alcohol I have with food. And one of the things that came up was the weight in my belly. And she said, now at the very end of the session, I think she picked up on that this was a sensitive issue for me. And she said, now we need to talk about the weight. And I was just like, oh, shit, you noticed? And so she said, all that is emotional weight. And it's been used in your life to protect you. And I was like, protect me from what? And she said, to protect you from emotions that you weren't able to have, to protect you from feelings that you haven't been able to feel. It's just been a protection for you. And she said, what I want you to do is to go home and meditate. And when you're talking to your spirit guides, I want you to say, thank you for, hold on to your belly and say, thank you for protecting me, but I no longer need you. And I was like, okay, like, it's going to be that easy? Like, I'll do that. So I went to home and I started meditating. And this was when I really first started meditating. I had tried meditating before, and I didn't really get what all the fuss was about. I was like, I'm already numb. Do I really need to get even number? Like, that's what I thought it was for. Like, for people with anxiety, like, to calm them down. Like, I felt that this was kind of the same thing. So I went home and I started meditating, and it was the very first time that I started asking questions before I meditated. And the first time that I got a download, I couldn't believe it. Something had come up in my ayahuasca experience, and it showed me this teacher from 4th grade. And I was just like, what the heck is he doing here? And then when I went to go meditate with these intentions, I was just like, thank you. What is this weight here to show me? Like, why am I carrying this weight? And it was like this flash of this girl that I was in fourth grade with who had gotten picked to be in the gifted program. And I had decided that I wasn't as good as her. And that is something that I carried with me throughout my whole life, that other people are better than me. I'm not good enough, which I think that's a thing for most people. But for me to understand where this came from was huge. And that's when I became hooked on meditation. And I have been given so many downloads and guidance through my meditation practice that I don't know that there's anything in my life that I do that could be better than that. Although I have gotten things so from every modality that I continue to do. So then I found sound healing, and sound healing is so powerful. Actually, before my first Reiki session, she used the bowls before the session, and that was the first time that I had identified my body as energy. I just felt my whole body vibrating. And when and sound healing for me is also a place where I can get downloads. I'm also able to get a lot of communication in my dreams. I am very, I ask questions before I go to sleep at night if I am struggling with anything, and I get so many crazy, crazy dreams that help me put the puzzle pieces together. And so after the Reiki, and then I started meditating, I started to understand that I am responsible for my own life. And that's kind of what led me here, doing this podcast, this deep knowing that I am here for a reason. And the reason is to heal from past lives. That might sound a little woo-woo to some people, but it's okay. It's what I believe. And if anything I say that you don't agree with, you can just leave it. But I believe that I came here with a purpose. And in this life, I'm meant to overcome certain things that my soul wanted to learn. I believe Earth is a school, and the people and the places and the experiences that you have are all there to help your soul expand and grow and overcome. And that's where I am. I am not by any means healed completely. I don't know that anybody would ever be. We are human. We are here to struggle with some things. It's the point. But I have made a lot of progress from where I was 3 years ago compared to now. So the things that I still struggle with are still food is a thing, money is a thing with my scarcity mindset, relationships with men is a big thing. I'm still in the process of trying to figure this out. And I know for sure that self-love and my feelings of worthiness are all at the root of the problem, or where the healing needs to happen. So in the next episode, I want to dig in a little deeper to try to understand why or how you can go from being a cute, delicious little kid to self-hate and feeling that you aren't worthy of love. So that will do it for me today. I hope you were able to get a little better understanding of my history and how this podcast came about. And until next time, have a great one.